My shepherd gives me all I need. And we're going to sing that again. We're going to start with the first verse this time. So please be ready with your part, which of course goes, God my shepherd gives me all I need. You go. God my shepherd gives me all I need. And you can sing while you're doing other necessary things. We sing. God my shepherd, God my shepherd gives me all I need. You will want for nothing. God my shepherd gives me all I need. God leads the way and I follow after. God my shepherd gives me all I need. Through grasses green and by peaceful water, God my shepherd gives me all I need. So what if shades of death are near? God my shepherd gives me all I need. Your shepherd's staff will drive back fear. God my shepherd gives me all I need. God is my shepherd. God my shepherd gives me all I need. Oh yes you are. God my shepherd gives me all I need. Love and mercy. God my shepherd gives me all I need. Gladly God will give me. God my shepherd gives me all I need. You are the shepherd, you set the table. God my shepherd gives me all I need. Now who can harm me? Nobody's able. God my shepherd gives me all I need. Here in your house where all can see, God my shepherd gives me all I need. As honored guests to welcome me, God my shepherd gives me all I need. God is my shepherd. God my shepherd gives me all I need. Oh yes you are. God my shepherd gives me all I need. God is my shepherd. God my shepherd gives me all I need. Paul Shepherd on djembe. Who gave us all we needed.
Oh, we're so funny.
I know, but it was awesome.
Oh, I need a copy of
I'm playing the next one. I don't know what it is.
Everyone Born. I remember that's the one I gave away. It helps. It's just all right. So as we're gathering, some of you have just come in. We're doing gathering songs. And not only are they songs to gather by, but they're also going to be singing them again as the days progress. So we're going to sing, this one is from New Zealand. Well, partly New Zealand and partly the US of A. It's called For Everyone Born, lyrics by Shirley Arena Murray. And we're going to invite you to kind of join in on this as we sing along. And you'll get the idea, particularly first, of the refrain. So this is For Everyone Born. Everyone born, a place at the table. For everyone born, clean water and bread. A shelter, a space, a safe place for growing. For everyone born, a star overhead. justice and joy, compassion and peace. Yes, God will delight when we are creators of justice, justice and joy. For woman and man, a place at the table, revising the roles, deciding the share, with wisdom and grace, dividing the power. For woman and man, a system that's fair, and God will delight when we are creators of justice and joy, compassion and peace. Yes, God will delight when we are creators of justice, justice and joy. For young and for old, a place at the table, a voice to be heard, a part in the song. The hands of a child in hands that are wrinkled. For young and for old, the right to belong. And God will delight when we are creators of justice and joy, compassion and peace. Yes, God will delight when we are creators of justice, justice and joy. For gay and for straight, a place at the table, a covenant share, a welcoming space, a rainbow of race and gender and color. For gay and for straight, the chalice of grace. And God will delight when we are creators of justice and joy, compassion and peace. Yes, God will delight when we are creators of justice, justice and joy. For everyone born, a place at the table, to live without fear and simply to be, to work, to speak out, to witness and worship. For everyone born, the right to be free. And God will delight when we are creators of justice and joy, compassion and peace. Yes, God will delight when we are creators of justice, justice and joy. Yeah, great. Yeah. So we have Felicia on violin, Norm on trumpet. We're going to sing a song called My Love, Colors Outside the Lines. You all know it? Please join in. It's in more voices, and now here, live on stage. Okay. Okay. 2, 3, 4. My love colors outside the lines, exploring paths the few could ever find, and takes me into places where I've never been before, and opens doors to worlds outside the lines. My Lord colors outside the lines, turns wounds to blessings, water into wine, and takes me into places where I've never been before, and opens doors to worlds outside the lines. We'll never walk on water if we're not prepared to drown. Body and soul need a soaking from time to time. And we'll never move the gravestones if we're not prepared to die and realize there are worlds outside the line. My soul longs to color outside the lines. Tear back the curtain, sun come in and shine. I want to walk beyond the boundaries where I've never been before, and open doors to worlds outside the line. We'll never walk on water if we're not prepared to drown. Body and soul need a soaking from time to time. And we'll never move the gravestones if we're not prepared to die and realize there are worlds outside the line. My soul longs to color outside the line. Tear back the curtain, sun come in and shine. I want to walk beyond the boundaries where I've never been before, and open doors to worlds outside the line. Let's do it twice.
singing again before
We're singing again.
Okay, good.
Yep.
Okay, I just was like, I'm not supposed to be up here yet, am I? Okay, good.
Yeah. No, so we're done.
Oh, you are done singing
Yeah,
for
we're
now.
done. Yep.
Okay.
Yep. So we'll stand by for the piano. Now, will you give me some kind of a signal?
I will be up here and all.
I see. Okay.
I'll be over there.
Okay. I'll play at the end of each one of the panels.
Yes, yeah. I don't know if Patty's going to speak between each of them. Let me just ask her. Yeah. Ask Patty. As we are beginning to gather, I would invite you to begin taking your seats. I would like to begin with a couple of announcements as you settle yourselves in. Just a reminder that as we walk carefully upon the earth, to walk carefully around the room. There are a number of cables, and every once in a while, there's a table with a projector on it, and although the cables are taped down, it's very easy to bump into those projectors. So please take care when you're wandering around, just to be aware of your surroundings so that we don't knock those off or affect our supply. I would also like to take a moment to introduce to you the members of the Sexual Misconduct Prevention, the Sexual Misconduct Prevention Consultants. And as the three of them are in this court at this time, I would ask them to stand and be recognized. Diane Bennett-Jones, Kathy Hurd, and Robin Wardlaw. There's Robin, and where's Kathy? Hi, Kathy. Thank you. These are the consultants for this annual meeting. If any concerns are raised that would be covered by the church's policy on sexual abuse. So please remember that they are here. And a reminder as well that we do have chaplains available to you. We have the quiet room and the chapel room in the Margaret Scott room, which is out the door to my right. All right. I'm going to turn it over to Patty Evans so that we can move into our second theme discussion time. We're well ahead of our timings, so let's keep that trend going.
Well, we are moving into it. I want to start by saying a word of thanks for those of you who made a shift of your table groups. I realize that for some you had kind of bonded even in that short time with the folks that you were with. But for our purposes today, it's just good to hear as many voices as possible. And we'll do one more shift for the evening session. And then tomorrow you can sit wherever you want to. We would like to have the table group facilitators still facilitate if there are discussions tomorrow, but this particular process will be finished by this evening. And this afternoon now we have a panel for our presentation to begin a session on human sexuality. And after each speaker, not before Basil, who will start, but then in between each speaker, we are going to sing together, "Here I Am, Lord, Is It I, Lord?" And so expect that will come up on the screen in between each one. And then following, as we did this morning, there will be a time of discussion, and we will have 2 questions in that time this afternoon. And so our panel, I'm going to start right here, is Basil Coward. He serves at Victoria Square United Church, and he also is a counselor and teaches English at George Brown College. And then next to him, Ann Harbridge. Ann is a past president of Toronto Conference, and she currently serves at Trinity Centennial in Rosemont, Ontario. Dennis Posno. Am I pronouncing it right? Posno? Okay. Dennis has many years of pastoral ministry and is retired. And then Sarah Jane Wetalainen has been on the leadership team for youth and young adults for this conference meeting. She participated in an open hands trip, and she also was part of the delegation that went to South Korea and visits with the PROK. So she attends Burton Avenue in Barrie, and we welcome our panelists, and we look forward to what they will be sharing with us. Basil, we'll let you lead off.
Good afternoon, and thank you, Patty. Thank you, Toronto Conference, for the opportunity to share and to learn. I'm a Black queer Christian man with multiple and fluid identities. I'm one whom you'll find at the front of the church. We have served in ministry for 25 years. You'll find me strolling the hallways of George Brown College. You'll find me hanging around the beaches of Barbados, my first home where my roots run deep. You'll find me walking along Church Street in the gay village in Toronto, where when gayness tenderly wrapped herself around me, I initially pushed her away and now have come to hold her with exuberance. You'll find me at the bedside of my 2 babies, one 25 years old, the other 6'3", but always my babies. You'll find me carried away on the wings of story. I have an extravagant curiosity with oral histories, sacred texts, and storytelling. So 12 years ago, the doors of the UCC were flung open for me as a gay man. And with deep gratitude, I stepped across the threshold. However, I needed to cleave myself into 3 distinct parts: queer, Christian, Black. Space has been made for the queer piece of me. The context exists to house the Christian peace I still firmly believe. The question that I continue to wrestle with, is there room within the UCC for this black body of mine? It's a question I keep asking myself. And if I, as an ordered person, experience this cleavage, this fragmentation, then I wonder about the lived experiences of my black LGBTQ folks around Toronto and beyond. Emily, thank you so much for the statement, "You can't ask me to leave part of who I am outside of the church's door." My multiple identities are inextricably interwoven. And even if I wanted to, I could not separate them. And it is this intersection of blackness and queerness that I continue to lift before the church. We've done such a wonderful, wonderful job. Lots more work to be done. A tremendous amount of work in welcoming queer folks who look like the majority church. Now, I trust that the process of becoming an affirming conference will be a public declaration from the 93rd annual meeting of the conference that we will cease to build barriers that hinder black LGBTQ folks from becoming part of our communities of faith, and that we will begin to dismantle the barriers already in place, whether they are in place intentionally and or unintentionally. See, this is not about charity. It is not about niceness. We are not doing black LGBTQ folks a favor. It's that our table is impoverished without black LGBTQ folks. It is that as we become an affirming conference, we say to queer folks, we say to black LGBTQ folks that Toronto Conference is a place of refuge from the chaos that too often you experience as black LGBTQ folks, because you're often not welcomed and or there is not a place of welcome within the black church. We want you to know that there is a place for you within this church. That the Toronto Conference becomes a place of rest, a place to be nourished, a place to be safe, a place where black LGBTQ folks can flourish, develop, grow beyond the survival mode that too often we find ourselves in because of systems that dehumanize and oppress and marginalize. So here I am. Here I am in this beautiful, strong, black, queer body. Here I am in a church where I'm too readily alienated, where my culture is too often subjugated, where my blackness is made invisible because it is easier to not see me or to insist, including the herring practices, that I become like the other, the majority, therefore there would really no longer be a need to see me. Here I am, determined that my narrative will not be supplanted by another narrative. Here I am, standing in this 93rd annual meeting of the Toronto Conference of the United Church. I choose to be. Thank you.
Well, here I am with really two stories to share with you today on the issue of affirming and gender identity. The first that I've been asked to speak about comes from my experience of working with the Shelburne Primrose Pastoral Charge in Northern Waters Presbytery. I've worked with this pastoral charge off and on as supervisor for about 7 or 8 years now, and I'm currently working with them in a 10-hour-a-week appointment. I've come to know these folk pretty well, and I've come to love them. My work with the pastoral charge began when their minister at the time, Reverend Edward Bell Smith, announced to the congregation that he was no longer Edward and would now be known as Christina. I'm sorry to say that despite everyone's work at the time to make the transition as smooth as possible, it did not go well for either Christina or the congregation. In reflecting back, I think there were a number of things at play. First, this is a very conservative congregation in a very conservative part of Ontario, in a small town where everyone knows everyone else's business. Many conversations take place in Pete's Donuts or other coffee shops around town. The whole town quickly knew the church's business. Careful planning was done with the church council, with Edward, and with presbytery involvement through the personnel minister and a representative from our pastoral relations committee. The timing for the announcement seemed critical. I will say that the key leaders of the church were very supportive of Edward and Christina at the time. And in fact, that may have been cause for some of the problems that developed once the announcement was made. Many in the church, though they loved Edward, simply could not wrap their heads around the transition to Christina. There was anger, disappointment, resentment, even betrayal, which built up to the point where Christina was not able to remain in the pastoral relationship. And the anger and resentment did not rest solely on Christina either. The members of the church council took a lot of heat, mostly because they knew ahead of time and they didn't share the news with their congregation. The council lost the trust of many in the church, and in fact, many left council. Many in the congregation left the congregation, taking their contributions with them, to the point where a previously relatively healthy church reached the brink of closure. It was only with considerable financial support from a PTCC grant and the hiring of a diversity expert that I believe the church survived. They continue to struggle financially, although no worse than many other churches. However, the many rifts that were created when Christina transitioned have remained. There are 2 points in this pastoral charge. The smaller of the two, Primrose, I think has weathered this better than the larger congregation of Shelburne. And I believe this is partly due to communication styles and the fact that at Primrose, the church council is the whole congregation. There was none of the issue that some knew and others didn't. Presbytery took a lot of heat for the way things unfolded. I've heard that we let the council and the congregation down by not providing them with enough support, even though I think we did provide considerable support, both in financial ways as well as with leadership. But perhaps it came too late in the process. We were learning at the same time as we were trying to offer support. This is a church with very different perspectives on things. Some had no trouble at all with their minister transitioning from male to female, while others are still not able to this day to accept it. Some of the things I've heard said around diversity, particularly related to refugees and Muslims, for example, would curl your hair. On the other hand, there are many in the congregation with very open and loving attitudes to all people. Could Edward, Christina's transition have gone more smoothly? Perhaps. But my sense is that it was doomed to failure from the beginning, in this particular pastoral charge particularly. And my recommendation would be that great care needs to be taken should a similar situation arise. My feeling is that context is ever so important when discussing issues of inclusivity, sexuality, gender, and even whether or not to be affirming. In a rural, conservative area such as Shelburne, and even where I serve in Rosemont, they have little experience with these issues. and even those who have experience within their families simply don't speak of it in public. Or if they do, it will be public knowledge at the coffee shop the next day. Others may be aware and they may whisper about it, but sexuality and gender identity are not spoken about out loud. Even when it comes to becoming affirming, I can tell you it is a struggle. When I first came to Rosemont 14 years ago, I attempted to enter into conversation about our marriage policy. Twice, when I would raise the subject at a board meeting, a hand would go up and the motion to adjourn would be made. End of discussion. That doesn't mean we should give up. I'm happy to report that last year, Trinity Centennial in Rosemont passed a new marriage policy allowing for same-gender marriages, both by the minister and in the sanctuary of the church. Are they ready to declare themselves as an affirming congregation? I'd say no, not yet, but I'm hopeful that one day they will. How did we move from adjourning any meeting that raised this subject to an inclusive marriage policy? I'd say it was a very slow, sometimes painful process, but it came about because of the trust that had been built between minister, congregation, and among those in the congregation. It came about through honest, open, sometimes heart-wrenching conversations. Last year, Dennis and I teamed together, and we invited people into conversation and listening circles. We invited people to tell their stories. When they sat and they listened to their friend and their neighbor talk about a daughter who told her parents she was gay, and if they didn't want her anymore, she had made arrangements to live with a friend. Or the woman whose husband told her that he still loved her, but he was gay and he couldn't live in the marriage any longer, and whose son soon followed suit. Hearts were changed. After a year of intentional conversation, our new and inclusive marriage policy passed by an overwhelming 85%. Certainly there were those who chose not to attend the meeting when the vote was held, and I know they are not necessarily in agreement. However, they have not left the church. And I think they might have intentionally stayed away the day of the vote because they knew they were no longer in the majority. The gentleman who had previously moved to adjourn meetings discussing the marriage policy, who, by the way, is 91 years of age, is no longer on council, but he was present for the vote. I don't know how he voted, but he's still in church every Sunday, sitting in the same pew he has sat in for the 50 years that the church has been there. I believe the conference should name themselves as affirming. I hope our presbytery in Northern Waters will do the same. We need to set an example for our congregations, but we also need to be patient and gentle with them and bring them along in a way that includes them and does not exclude or ostracize those who don't think as we do. Leading by example and teaching that God loves all of us, regardless of sexuality, gender, or any other differences we may have, is the only way forward.
Thank you for inviting me to be a part of this afternoon. I am 70 years old. Will be 71 on September the 20th. My wife and I are caring for her mother, who is a 97-year-old woman who has mobility issues, and whenever Kim answers the phone between 5 and 7, she says, "Please call back. I'm the administrator of a long-term care facility looking after my mother and husband, and I'll call you back." But I tell you my age because I think it's important to understand that a younger generation perhaps has very different experiences than an old guy like me. I was a boy in the 1950s. I was a young teenager in the early 1960s. And the whole gay lesbian conversation really was not a But I want to tell you a couple of moments from my life that shaped the way I thought in my early adult years. When I was in high school, I was a cute kid. No, I really was. I was a cute kid, and I was in a fashion show with 4 or 5 girls from London South Collegiate Institute. I was the only guy. Our picture appeared in the London Free Press, and it was not long after that that I received a phone call from a gentleman who identified himself as a photographer and said that he had seen my picture in the London Free Press and thought that I was a good-looking kid and wondered if I'd be interested in sitting for some photos, which rather took me back because I was probably 14 or 15 years of age. And then he asked how well I was hung, and I decided it was time to hang up the phone. When I was in later high school, I worked at a record store in London, and there was a gentleman who regularly used to come into the store whenever I was working and would regularly seek me out to ask questions about particular music albums and those kinds of things. And I was pulled aside by the owner of the store, a woman, one day, and she said, "Denny, you need to know something, that this gentleman is a gay man, and I think he is interested in you. And I'm only letting you know because my ex-husband is also a gay man, and these 2 gentlemen were associates." So I was given a heads up to be careful. And I can remember it was not long after that, when I was taking the bus home to my home in South London, that the bus was followed by a car, and it was this gentleman and another in the car. And when I got off the bus, I ran as fast as I could to the corner of Bruce and Cathcart Streets to avoid any kind of trouble. So those were my experiences as a young boy and as a teenager. I didn't have many other experiences that were like that, but certainly those were terrifying experiences for me, and they shaped the way I thought about gay people. I didn't talk about it a whole lot with others because it was a very personal thing, and I didn't want to feel embarrassed. But I probably recognize now that the gentlemen involved here were pedophiles, and they may have been after young girls as much as they may have been after young boys. I don't know. But that was the thinking that shaped my life. When I was ordained, moved up north, had a wonderful ministry. Moved back to Southern Ontario, and it was in the 1970s that the United Church began to have its conversations about membership for gay and lesbian people within the church. And I can remember seeking out a doctor in our congregation and asking him point blank what he thought about the gay-lesbian issue. Was it, how did people become gay? And he basically said that from his medical understanding at the time, I remember this is 40-some-odd years ago, it seems, 40 years ago, that it was a choice or it was an illness, that it wasn't a way of life that was God-given, and there was some perversion involved. So that was the medical advice I got. And I know some of you are saying, really? Well, that's really the way many people thought at the time. When I was in Sault Ste. Marie in 1988, the United Church was prepared to pass the motion through its general council that any person, regardless of sexual orientation, would be welcomed into the membership of the United Church of Canada. And I struggled with it. And I struggled with it because of that experience. In our church was a woman whose son was a candidate for Christian ministry, a gay man. And I did take a very strong position against that resolution back in 1988, although it was not a resolution that I pursued in subsequent years, but it was very real for me at the time. And being in the north, the further away from Toronto you are, it seems to me, the more conservative you might become. So we were in the north, and the congregation supported the position that was expressed. But I did, on a couple of occasions and through the board, speak very strongly against the recommendation to this general council. I did not know at the time, I found out in the midst of it all, that a woman who was a part of our church, that her son was studying for ministry and was a gay man. My son used to golf with this woman. My children had her daughter as one of their teachers, and they loved her more than any other teacher. And she was there regularly every Sunday. Never said a word to me in anger or in sadness about the things that I had said. I moved away from the Sioux, came back to Southern Ontario, and wouldn't you know it, I got to know people who were gay and lesbian. But I didn't know it initially. I just got to know some people whom I respected and cared for and thought were wonderful human beings and that I loved and wanted to hang out with, and along the way discovered that they were gay or lesbian. And you know what? It didn't matter at all. And I made the discovery that my experiences as a young man in those early years of my ministry, although they had shaped me and although they were real and valid at the time, in many respects were not valid anymore. And on this journey that I was on, I had to move away from fear or anger to a place of understanding and ultimately to a place of acceptance. It was a couple of Christmases ago that I returned to my church in the Sioux for at the Sunday after Christmas, Central in Sault Ste. Marie, and the woman whose son is the minister in our church was present. And after the service, I walked up to her and said hi and embraced her. And I said, I just want you to know that I was wrong, and I'm sorry. And she hugged me even closer. And in January of that year, I received a note from her which said that my apology was the best Christmas gift she received that year. All of us are on a journey. Some may be at the place that I was 55 years ago. Some may be at the place I was at in 88. Some may be at the place I am at now. All of us are on a journey. And I guess the discovery that I have made is that it is wrong to judge anyone by the color of their skin, or by the color of their hair, Arctic blonde, or by their waist size, or by their height, or by their gender, or by any other measure. When God measures us, God doesn't put the tape measure around our heads. He puts the tape measure around our hearts. And I'm hopeful that as Toronto Conference continues in this journey to become an affirming conference, that it will recognize that not all of us are at the same place, that we are on a journey, and that it will hopefully encourage everyone to be at the place to know that wherever they are on the journey, as an inclusive church, that everyone is welcome to be a part of it. I have a favorite biblical verse. It comes from the writings of St. Paul in the book of Galatians. He simply writes, "The only thing that counts is faith expressing itself through love." Think of that for a moment. The only thing that counts is faith expressing itself through love. If we choose to become an affirming conference, let us pray that our faith expresses itself in loving ways. Thank you.
In school, and I'm certain at a lot of church workshops and events, I've had to count up my privilege, like tally up the areas where you're a majority or where you have a powerful position in our society. For example, I am white, I'm middle class, I am cisgender, I live in a wealthy country like Canada. And then counting up every way you're a minority or have less power. For example, I'm a woman. In most of the world, that puts me behind men. I'm Métis, so I'm half First Nations. I'm Ojibwe. This activity is meant to help you understand the lens through which you and others view the world in different ways. It didn't occur to me at the time, but getting myself my first girlfriend removed my straight privilege, which suddenly began to change me and how I experience everything. Honestly, a lot of things didn't occur to me at the time. I'm going to tell you a little of my coming out story, starting with how I came out to myself, which was less than a year ago now. I was laying next to a very close friend of mine one evening. We were just having another typical sleepover as platonic gal pals. And she looked at me and said, "Can I kiss you?" And I said, "Yeah, if you'd like." And then she did. And then I thought something of it. With one kiss, suddenly I had a new sexual identity, a new lens to see the world through. I'd thrown away some of my privilege forever and discovered a whole new way to be me. No, not really. It, of course, didn't happen that fast at all. No, with that kiss, my only thought was, oh, that was fun. We could do that again. At the time, I really did not think all that much of it. I'd been raised in a very accepting environment. My mother, who's a minister, had always said, "Love is love," and she loved us, and God loves everyone, and the world is just made of love. My grandmother had once, my grandmother who, I'm not sure how old she was at the time, but said to my aunt, who's also a minister, she thought maybe Jesus might have been gay. So that was the sort of family environment I grew up in. My high school had been small and fairly friendly, and our GSA, our Gender Sexuality Alliance, was always really popular, and everything that they threw was accepted and really highly approved of. So for a long while, it didn't really hit me that being gay was going to be all that much different than being straight. I was incredibly lucky that at this time in history, all my friends and family were just happy for me and my new love. I still remember the day I came out to my mother. That's a lot of people's favorite stories. It was about a week after this first kiss, and I still glowed with that excitement that comes with a new relationship. And my mother and I were having brunch in Huntsville after church, and I was talking about how great my friend Chelsea was and what we were texting about. And my mother looked at me and sort of said, "You're trying to tell me you're dating this person? And I was like, well, that's not what I was trying to tell you, but you're not wrong. Without even missing a beat, my mother said, that's nice. I'd like to have her as a daughter-in-law. Then we finished brunch and we went for a hike. When I told all my friends and my church family, many of whom knew my partner before she became my partner, were a mix of surprised, happy, supportive, and curious. How did it happen? Did we plan to do long distance? She lives in St. John's, Newfoundland. I know, right, I went gay and then went for a long distance relationship. I never claimed not to be crazy. Not everyone I knew approved, of course. A friend from work who's a Jehovah's Witness asked me a lot of questions about my church and how I was allowed to be gay. And although we never fought or disagreed anything, we had a fascinating swap of ideas and beliefs, and she politely told me that she did believe that because of this choice I was making, I was going to hell. So how did I reconcile my faith and my sexuality? Honestly, that has never been much of a concern for me. I knew my church in 1988 decided it was okay to be gay. I was not even close to being born yet. I'd been taught that God is faithful and loving, and the people in my church and life welcomed me with open arms. For me, the struggle was with other parts of my identity. Was I now just gay because I loved a woman? Was I bisexual because I dated boys before? Was I something else? Maybe I should Google it. I wasn't sure. I didn't think about it in the slightest until our relationship actually became Facebook official. Within about a week of me becoming publicly gay or whatever, I got a flood of emails. Would I like to speak at a gender and sexuality panel at conference? Would I join our presbytery's Affirming Ministries task group? Do I know where LGBTQ youth can meet each other in my city? Whoa, I did not know that I had become an expert just because I kissed a girl one time. That's when I realized that things really had changed, that I was someone different than I had been a couple of months previously. For sermon purposes, at a LGBTQ church on the recent Toronto conference trip to South Korea, the person delivering the sermon came up to me ahead of time and hesitantly asked me how I was identifying these days. I almost said, I'm Sarah Jane. We came to Korea together. Are you asking me that really? And I realized that it was not Sarah Jane. Am I gay? Am I bi? What is this conclusion I have come to now? I think my actual response is, I don't know, say what you'd like, gay, straight, or bi. I'm identifying as someone with a girlfriend. And so the sermon said just that. When introducing our small group, there were a couple of gay people and someone who got a new girlfriend. The Korean woman I spent much of the rest of the day with asked me interesting questions about what it was like to be a lesbian in Canada and told me about that in Korea. And every time she used the word lesbian, I sort of turned my head like, whoa, where, what, who? It was just so unused to that word. I don't think I'd ever used it to describe myself before, so it just felt a little odd, but I rolled with it. I mean, I'm not a labels person, so for those of you who are, be sure to pick out a nice one at least. But I was just Sarah Jane, dating a lovely Newfie girl and doing all the same things with church and everything. I'd heard many stories about difficult encounters for LGBTQ people all over the world, and I'd heard about my partner and others and their struggles, talking about their faith and sexuality. And now my journey has not, of course, been perfect by any means, and honestly, it has not been very long. But it's very clear to me that compared to most members of my LGBTQ community, I've had it pretty easy so far. So when I was asked to speak here today, I wasn't really sure what to say. I didn't think I had much to talk about yet. Then I thought about the question they asked us to think about during our little conference call. How would our conference be different if it was to become affirming? Well, it's just like everything with truth and reconciliation. Sure, our church has done a lot of wrong and sometimes still does to the LGBTQ community and many other marginalized groups. Don't get me wrong, just because my minister and church are awesome and really supportive of me, don't believe for every minute that all churches are. We've come a long way, but we're not there yet. We'll never be there. This is a journey. Some would argue that it's already better, so why bother becoming affirming? It's just because your street or city recycles now doesn't mean we've saved the planet and we can call it a day. I mean, I'm sure some people do think that, but you're wrong. Affirm is about committing to work and education, truth and reconciliation, being better tomorrow and every day. I'd love it if the majority of stories in the next years could go like mine has at times. Imagine for those on the margins to believe that no matter what happens in your life, to know that there is a place we can all feel safe and at home and loved, that a whole community of people has voted to work diligently to create that for people who do not have that place. And that place is in God and in our church.
I want to say a deep word of thanks to this panel, each of them for what they have shared with us. Such rich contributions you have made. And we're going to have an opportunity now to go into discussion time and savor some of what we have heard and reflect together. So thank you very much. And I'm going to pose the question that we will turn to first. And as we did this morning, with having heard so much, we need just a few moments to absorb and take it in. And I will signal again when we can start talking as each table group is ready. So thank you, panel, and we'll put up the first question. What experiences or encounters have you had that are affecting or informing your discernment on this question of becoming an affirming conference? So what experiences or encounters have you had that are affecting or informing your discernment? So we'll have a few moments of silence, and then I'll signal when we will begin our discussions. I'm going to pose now a second question that will build on the first question. In what ways have the presentations that you heard from the panel either confirmed or challenged understandings and perceptions that you have held? In what ways have the presentations you have heard either confirmed or challenged understandings and perceptions you have held? We'll have about another 20 minutes for discussion. I want to have your attention before we go into the break. I got one facilitator mentioned to me that there were some folks who were wishing that they had some input or some resource to address the questions that might come to them, citing particularly some Old Testament scripture that people use to have a non-affirming approach. And so I just want you to know that on the United Church website, there are some resources. And also, I was talking to Susie Henderson, and she will start to put some resources onto the Toronto Conference website so that people can access those and be able to feel that they have had some response to that need. Now, we're going to be going into the evening session when we come back from dinner tonight. And right now, we're going into a break time, so it seems to me that this is the best time for us to do our last rotation. And I'm not going to use the same question because those people moved last time, and unless you fit this new qualification, you won't have to move. So here's the question, is in your table group, the people whose first name begins with a letter that is closest to M for the merry month of May will be the two people who will move to the next table. So if your name is Louise, you may have to move. Don't go to your break yet, because there are going to be some instructions, okay? We just want you to make your move to the next table. Kind of pick up your bed and walk. I quit the discussion time. I think we're have time for this.
Yes, yeah. It should be a simple thing.
Okay, we're almost there. As soon as you can be seated, the president will give us some instructions. Thank you for your engagement in this process this afternoon, and we'll look forward to this evening's panel.
The instructions are simply to remind you that as we go off for our health break, that at 3:45 we will be gathering back with music, and you have a nice, comfortable 15 minutes between 3:45 and 4 o'clock to be sitting in your spot by 4 o'clock, because we do need to do a quorum check once again at that time. So please be very mindful of that time so that we can move on to the important business of hearing from our candidates and admittance. Thank you. Have a good health break.